In the early years of the 18th century, two writers became the best of friends. One was a brilliantly witty English Catholic, Alexander Pope.
And the other, an acerbic Irish Protestant, Jonathan Swift.
This man's words, I honestly believe, will last forever. Alexander.
Do you know what he needs? A big mad pal!
Across 3 decades, their friendship inspired poems and prose that were savagely funny.
His illness was surprisingly relieved by a plentiful fatted stool.
And sometimes simply savage.
Aye, not bad.
Heralding a golden age of satire.
A young, healthy child is a year-old, a most delicious, nourishing and wholesome food, whether stewed, roasted, baked or boiled.
And I'm proud to be an Okie from Waikiki. With my travelling companion, the crime writer Denise, Mina, we're going to follow in their footsteps.
We'll go to London and see if we can stalk them.
You leaks, I don't know the way to London by foot.
Together we'll explore these wickedly satirical writers whose cutting words revolutionised English literature and continue to inspire today.
British satirists still think that you can make a difference by making a joke.
It's like the zombie apocalypse, but with poets.
I want to take this great big convoy across the USA. Convoy. Only a year into their close friendship, Alexander Pope and Jonathan Swift were separated. Swift's controversial religious satire and the downfall of the Tories had brought an abrupt end to his political ambitions in London.
Swift has realised he's never going to get a position in England. The Whigs have taken over, he's in disgrace, and he has to go and do the job that he's taking the money for already in Ireland.
Pope, meanwhile, is starting to get a really fabulous reputation as a poet. And he's just signed the deal for the Iliad, which would take 7 years, which not only is going to make him a lot of money, but it's going to absolutely send his reputation through the roof. And I'm sure he was gutted, Pope, that the company of greatness, as far as Swift represented, was moving away from him.
Swift was devastated to return to Ireland. Waiting for the boat to take him away from Pope and his life in London, he recorded his disdain for the country of his birth. Lo, here I sit at Holyhead with muddy ale and mouldy bread. All Christian victuals stink of fish, and where my enemies would wish. With rage impatient makes me wait a passage to the land I hate. Back home, Swift took up his position as Dean of St Patrick's Cathedral in Dublin.
Very pretty.
He was actually a pretty great dean, but he was quite ferocious. He was the first person to introduce a weekly service on a Sunday, because they didn't have communion every Sunday. Right. So he made it very high church coming from England. And I think one of the reasons was that a traditional charge against the Protestant church was they just didn't really bother, whereas there were a lot of devotions to attend to in the Catholic church. So he's making it a bit more formal, he's making it more communitarian, and he must have been a ferocious preacher. He actually did a sermon on sleeping in church, and he said, opium is not as stillifying as an afternoon sermon to some people. And there's a pulpit that was supposed to belong to him, and it was rumoured to have wheels, so he could be wheeled around the congregation and wake up sleeping people.
Can you imagine anything more frightening than the creaking sound of Jonathan Swift peering over the top of a moving pulpit? But in the context of the job, that kind of nuanced, more subtle doctrine doesn't really work, does it, when you're in your moving pulpit?
I think this was yet another face of Swift. It's the one that's the most difficult to reconcile with all the other Swifts, the radical, the chance taker, the wild man, the satirist. And, you know, he said, we have just enough religion to make us hate each other, but not enough religion to make us love each other, which I think is just so astute. But he is a real colonialist, and he does give sermons saying that the Irish would be improved if they were forced to speak English and adopt English mannerisms, and if Gaelic was suppressed.
Yeah,
it's
right.
hard to reconcile, isn't it? Yeah. Great guy.
I'm glad I did Pope.
Swift lamented his life in Ireland and let off steam to his old friend Pope. So this is the deanery where Swift is now living in Dublin, and it's not bad, is it? And the only way they continue their relationship is through letters. Can I read you a little bit about him describing inside?
Oh, please do.
You are to understand that I live in the corner of a vast, unfurnished house. My family consists of a steward, a groom, a helper in the stable, a footman, and an old maid, who are all board wages. That means they live in the house. And when I do not dine abroad or make an entertainment, the last is very rare, I eat a mutton pie and drink half a pint of wine, and my amusements are defending my small dominions against the Archbishop and endeavouring to reduce my rebellious choir. So his life's become really small compared to London.
Yeah. So can I do the reply?
Would you like to?
Oh, go on. I cannot suffer a friend to cross the Irish seas without bearing a testimony from me of the constant esteem and affection I am both obliged and inclined to have for you. It's better he should tell you than I how often you are in our thoughts and in our copse, and how I learned to sleep less and drink more whenever you are named among us.
Oh.
And then he says at the end, I don't know why I tell you all this, but that I always love to talk to you. And I love that. But this is not a time for any man to talk to the purpose. Now this gets dark. Truth is a kind of contraband commodity which I would not venture to export. And therefore the only thing tending that dangerous way which I shall say is that I am and always will be, with the utmost sincerity, yours, etc.
You get the rhythm of their chat as well, don't you? Do you know what I mean? And how they sign off to each other, because it's always so sweet. And they change it every single time.
But what comes across more than anything is they miss each other's company.
Massively.
Yeah.
And that letter that I read before, he signs off, I am and always will be extremely yours. You know? Here's a letter. This is him signing off, and he's just telling him what he thinks about him, and he's really unguarded. But I can assure you the scene and the times have depressed me wonderfully, for I will impute no defect to those 2 paltry years which have slipped by since I had the happiness to see you. I am, with the truest esteem, yours. Oh, God. Oh, it's heartbreaking.
Yeah, there are some people that say they're a bit of a performance, these letters, but I think they are 2 great writers and they can't stop writing greatly. But there's love in these letters. That's what's great.
It absolutely is.
Back in London, Pope's growing fame made him new friends and enemies.
So we're at the printers.
Font madness, look at this.
Chief among them was the publisher Edmund Curll, notorious for printing fakes, scandals, and works without the author's permission. He developed a long-running feud with Pope.
Now, I don't think Luke Skywalker would be the same man without Darth Vader, and Sherlock Holmes wouldn't be the same without Moriarty, and Pope wouldn't be the same without Edmund Curll. Edmund Curll becomes the arch-enemy of Alexander Pope. And I love Alexander Pope, as you know, but I have to say I have quite a big soft spot for Edmund Curll.
He's a bad man. Pope hates him to the very end, doesn't he?
Yes.
It's like an ongoing feud.
He brought out Pope's letters that he didn't give him permission to publish. If someone died, he'd immediately have out their works with stuff they hadn't written and stuff. Arbuthnot said it was one of the new terrors of death, was what might be published in your name by Curll. What he does, he prints these things called the court poems. And basically, they're mocking people who are at court, so they're quite dangerous. And he suggests that they were written by Pope Gay or Lady Mary Wortley Montagu. So Pope and his publisher, Bernard Lintott, arrange a meeting with Curll to discuss it. And they decide to be friends and bury the hatchet. So they toast their new friendship and everything's great. And then Curll suddenly feels very, very ill indeed. And it turns out that Pope has put an emetic in his drink.
What is an emetic?
It basically makes you vomit.
Right.
And I mean vomit and vomit. And he sent him into convulsions of vomiting in bright green, according to the details.
That's quite hardcore.
Yeah. So obviously, if you've just poisoned the publisher, you need to get out of town, you need to keep a low profile, you need to deny everything. Pope has a slightly different approach. He publishes a pamphlet called A Full and True Account of a Horrid and Barbarous Revenge by Poison on the Body of Mr. Edmund Curll, bookseller, with a faithful copy of his last will and testament published by an eyewitness. It's a beautiful little essay about the event. And he also, as it says, includes his last will and testament, in which Curll confesses to all his sins. He says that in the end his illness was surprisingly relieved by a plentiful fetid stool, which obliged them all to retire out of the room. It's so classically 18th century. And then distemper with a capital D. So chance to come over into Capital City over here. Just around the corner there's parentheses.
All right. Oh, no.
We don't even know where
I
they
need another
live.
tray.
Despite Pope's efforts to deter him, Curll continued to pirate and print works illegally, and the bitter feud between them would continue for the rest of their lives.
So I think that's enough ink.
OK. Swift wrote to Pope, and who are all those enemies you hint at? I can only think of Curll, Gilden, Squire Burnett, Blackmore, and a few others whose fame I have forgot. Tools, in my opinion, as necessary for a good writer as pen, ink and paper.
Oh, you can almost feel the contact.
Lift the whole thing up.
I lift this up.
It rests there. Oh, oh, oh! Oh, look.
And there you have...
Wow, it's so beautiful.
It's a quotation from Bernard Lintott, Pope's publisher, which is in the brochure. I fear you have got the vomiting distemper, which, I have heard, kills in half an hour. It's beautiful, though, isn't it?
In 1717, Pope published his first collection of poetry, which included the tragic and true story of 12th century lovers Heloise and Abelard. Discovering their secret affair, Heloise's family sent her to a nunnery and had poor Abelard castrated.
So this is set. It's Eloisa in the convent, and she's had a letter from Abelard. Listen to this. Ye rugged rocks, which holy knees have worn. Imagine these indentations from years of praying. Ye grots and caverns shagged with horrid thorn. Shrines where their vigils pale-eyed virgins keep, the nuns obviously, and pitying saints whose statues learn to weep. Though cold like you, now this you is quite ambiguous. It could mean Abelard, it could mean the rock, it could mean the saints, the nuns. Though cold like you, unmoved and silent grown, I have not yet forgot myself to stone. And when she talks about Abelard, it's quite dangerous talk for a non, for a Catholic at all, because he seems to be coming between her and God. All is not heavens while Abelard has part. Still rebel nature holds out half my heart. I can't completely give myself to God because I love this guy. And that is dangerous talk. And this is Pope the wit, remember, the clever guy from Rape of the Lock. This is heart-wrenching stuff.
That feels real.
Yeah, now, the ending is much discussed. And sure, if fate some future bard shall join in sad similitude of griefs to mine. So she's saying, if some poet in the future who feels a similar sadness, such if there be who loves so long, so well, let him our sad, our tender story tell. So she's sort of calling for Pope in the future. But last couplet, the well-sung woes will soothe my pensive ghost. He can paint them who shall feel them most.
Oh.
Pope's own love life is another sorry tale. He never married, but had attachments to a number of women, including the witty aristocrat and poet Lady Mary Wortley Montagu, who it seems rejected his advances.
It's quite a complicated story, the Pope and women story. He's very, very aware that he is 4'6" and he has this curved spine, and he sort of writes off the possibility, it seems to me. He describes himself as that little Alexander that women laugh at. Mm-hmm. I think he felt that no one would want him, was what he felt. There was also two Roman Catholic sisters, the Blount sisters, Teresa and Martha. One was very, very obviously attractive, and the other one was more interesting. And he fell in love with the attractive one, obviously, as men do, and then was kind of, I think, knocked back. And then really, his attachment to Martha Blount really lasted forever. And there's a poem where he describes being in London and thinking about these two sisters. I think this is beautiful. So when your slave at some dear idle time, not plagued with headaches or the want of rhyme, stands in the streets abstracted from the crew, and while he seems to study, thinks of you.
Oh.
And I think it just never happened. I think there was all sorts of disability. I think the Catholic thing was a problem. He wouldn't have been able to leave his money to his children. I think he decided in the end that he was married to poetry.
Yeah.
Pope's disability was often the target of those attempting to humiliate him.
Matt, I want to show you a painting. This is from much later. Pope's been dead, you know, nearly 100 years. And the painting is this amazing woman, Lady Mary Wortley Montagu's laughing rejection.
And she really is throwing her head back at the very thought of it, isn't she? His poetry had elevated him into a position where his peers were above his actual station, but he couldn't land a woman of that ilk.
No.
The fact that he didn't then choose to go with a woman of a lower social status who cared less about his disability might suggest that he was more concerned with his reputation than with his libido.
This is someone talking about Alexander Pope. The deformity of Pope is visible, present, lasting, unalterable, and peculiar to himself. 'Tis certain his original is not from Adam, but from the devil.
Well, I mean, yeah. I mean, there's a lot to unpack there, isn't there? I mean, deformity as being the work of the devil is a fairly general point of view. I think that would have been not particularly shocking for its time. Pope was fairly well regarded in society, so it's unusual to pick at someone who's kind of well known.
People wanted likenesses of Pope because he was famous. He favoured the bust
rather than the full statue. If you had a portrait taken, I can't imagine in a million years that you would say, can you just do head
Well,
and
no,
shoulders?
that's because I flipped it, Frank. I mean, I very much want to be counted as a disabled person. But, you know, at school, nuh-uh. At school, I just wanted to be like everybody else. I would have gone for the bust every time, so to speak, in parallel. Yeah, and not the difference, which is my arms, which, of course, now is you know, what I love, but he would have never got to that place.
No. Can disability be a motivation in the end? Can it give...
Hell yes.
Yeah.
I mean, I'll show them is huge and would have been with him all the time. I'll show them.
What I love about that, Matt, is he really did show them.
He did.
Swift also had a complicated relationship with women. His closest attachment was with Esther Johnson, whom he fondly called Stella. Their friendship began many years earlier here in Farnham, Surrey, in 1688. Oh, it's nice here. Swift was working as the secretary to the English statesman Sir William Temple. Esther was only 8 years old and the daughter of Temple's housekeeper. Everyone adores Esther Johnson, and no one more than Swift. And he actually forms a relationship with this little girl that will last a lifetime. And people have looked at that kind of askance. Was he, you know, interested in her because of her youth? I don't think that's what's going on at all. I think they form a relationship at this point.
There's a sort of Pygmalion feel to it. And I'm not saying this is what the case was, but this idea of creating this woman that you want. And the fact that he's tutoring her from childhood, it's almost like he's bespoke perfect female.
But this is who he saw when he saw Stella. It happened one single coxcomb of the pert kind was in her company among several other ladies, and in his flippant way began to deliver double meanings. So he's telling dirty jokes and he's making cheeky puns and
Inappropriate dirty jokes in female company.
Exactly. She said thus to the man, "Sir," I'm going to do it in a thick Glaswegian accent because this is kind of how I hear it, right? "All these ladies and I understand your meaning very well, having, in spite of our care, too often met with those of your sex who wanted manners and good sense. But, believe me, neither virtuous nor even vicious women love such type of conversation. However, I will leave you and report your behaviour." She's going to go and tell everybody he's done this. "And whenever I visit, I shall inquire first at the door whether you are in the house, that I may avoid you." She's not, do you know what I mean? She's not taking any nonsense from anybody. That's what he remembers. So I don't think she's a passive partner at all.
No.
They have this really close relationship. They really love and respect each other. And he writes Stella a poem every year on her birthday. And he does it for years. Can I read you one?
Oh, do. I love it.
And they're all a little bit slaggy, which makes me think, do you know what I mean? That like, it's
That's real love.
intimacy. It's real love. "Stella this day is 34. We won't dispute a year or more. However, Stella, be not troubled, although thy size and years are doubled." So he's saying you've got fatter and you're twice as old as you were when we first met. There's one bit here. "Pursue thy trade of scandal picking, thy hints that Stella is no chicken." Love that. It's so written to her and it's to cheer her up, and it's like knitting someone a jumper every year or knitting someone. Do you know what I mean? He's gone to the trouble of making a thing to give to her that's so specifically about her, and I think that just speaks so beautifully about their relationship.
I've had probably 20 birthday cards from people who I love and care about and who love and care about me saying you're getting older and you look terrible. It's a standard birthday joke.
My husband's younger than me, and the first year we were going out together, he got me a card that said 1941 was a very special year. When you opened it up, it said it was the year you were born.
Oh, wow.
And I thought, I really like this guy.
There you go.
But some see these poems as evidence of Swift's misogyny. What do you think of his birthday poems to Stella?
I mean, was she pleased? Hard to see how she could be.
Why?
Because he can't ever stop himself from saying something mean at the same time as saying something nice.
Happy birthday, you crack some tag.
No, but isn't that just the result of a long, long friendship?
But there's something cumulative when you read them one after the other. There's that repeated refrain of, you are really getting older, you are bigger. But he also can't let her be a woman. I mean, there's a kind of, he has to androgynize her in those. He says, the great thing about you is that you're not like a woman, is the subtext of some of the things that he is saying.
Stella followed Swift to Ireland. Some say they were secretly married, but Swift never publicly acknowledged the status of their relationship, so the truth remains a mystery.
After Swift departed for Ireland, Pope continued with his marathon task of translating Homer's Iliad. Hooked readers couldn't wait for the next edition, and he published 6 volumes over 6 years.
Obviously, when you're reading the translation of anything, you're thinking, well, how much of this is Pope and how much is Homer? Obviously, the story is Homer and all that, but it's the way Pope, with his super compact economy, gets loads of stuff into these couplets, and it just fits. I'm gonna give you an example. Agamemnon is a king, and he's a nasty piece of work. There's been a battle, and they've taken booty, both literally and metaphorically, and he has taken a priest's daughter, Agamemnon, as his choice. Oof. And the priest approaches him and says, you know, can I have that? Get a load of this for cruelty. Mine is thy daughter, priest, and shall remain. And prayers and tears and bribes shall plead in vain. And now in 4 lines, he sums up what's going to happen to his daughter now. Till time shall rifle every youthful grace, and age dismiss her from my cold embrace.
Oh.
It gets worse. In daily labours of the loom employed, or doomed to deck the bed she once enjoyed. So she'll be making the beds. She'll be like a mate. When I've finished with her and she's old and I've gone off for a bit. Hence then, to Argos shall the maid retire, I'm taking her away, far from her native soil and weeping sire.
It's a whole life story.
Yeah, 4 lines.
Yeah.
I've always avoided translation in poetry because I thought poetry was so nuanced, so individual that you can't translate it.
But when anything is very successful and inexplicably engaging on that kind of really profound level, the way great art is, people are always a bit churlish about it.
With the profits from the Iliad pouring in, Pope was able to continue expanding his villa and garden on the banks of the Thames in Twickenham.
He's very keen to certainly paint life there as this pastoral perfection.
He's very aware of how he's coming over publicly, isn't he?
Very much
Very
so.
managed.
I think, especially when he goes into the satire years, you've got to come across as someone who is not motivated by gain or ambition, who is happy to be away from the world. Listen to this is life in Twickenham. Content with little, I can piddle here on broccoli and mutton round the year. So, you know, I'm happy to manage. But ancient friends, though poor or out of play, that touch my bell, I cannot turn away. 'Tis true no turbots dignify my boards, but gudgeons, flounders, what my Thames affords. So, not the best fish, but locally sourced.
But while he claimed to be living frugally, Pope was fast becoming the toast of Twickenham.
Judith, when Pope rented that land at Twickenham, those 5 acres, what was on it? Was there a house already standing there?
That stretch of the river had a few fancy and noblemen's houses already, but really not many. It was mostly a working stretch of the river with boat makers, small holdings. And he didn't get his 5 acres all at once. He waited until another strip became available. And as most people do if they have a house, that it evolves, oh, I'll put a new bit on here and I'll just extend it out the side. People came to see him as a tourist attraction, would knock on the door and want to be let in, to be shown around the garden.
So that literally happened? Because
That
in
literally
Epistle to
happened.
Arbuthnot, he talks about...
He says he's besieged.
Yes.
People really would
People literally
turn up.
did. In fact, there was a guidebook to all the principal houses of Twickenham by a woman called Henrietta Pye, telling you how to do a day trip and which house to go in. And after Pope died, the day trippers were even more common. And so the owner of the house, Baroness Howe, did what any sensible person would do, and so she just knocked the villa down.
Brutal.
She was tired of the day trippers. Turner was living down the road and he was horrified, and he painted a portrait of the house being dilapidated from a distance. So Turner partly moved there because of the artistic associations, the literary associations. Horace Walpole at Strawberry Hill built a very different kind of house, but also very eccentric and individual. And they all were there because of the presence of Pope. He'd gentrified it and kind of sanctified it as this sort of sacred to the muses.
While Pope worked on his translations, Swift published very little on his return to Ireland. It was 6 years before a new law enraged and inspired him not only to pick up his pen, but to leap to the defence of the Irish people.
There was a law that Irish woolen merchants could only sell their stuff in England. That was obviously for a bad price. So people are going hungry, there's a lot of unemployment, there's a lot of poverty. So Swift finally does write something. It is an absolute banger. The proposal for the universal use of Irish manufacture. And he basically says Ireland should be independent in terms of manufacture and trade. We should boycott English goods. So this actually causes quite a dent. It kind of creates this sense that it's all right for us to stand up for ourselves.
Upon the whole, and to crown all the rest, let a firm resolution be taken by male and female, never to appear with one single shred that comes from England, and let all the people say, Amen.
There's a great bit in it where he says, the king would love to see the citizens of Ireland, I know, celebrating his birthday dressed only in their own manufactured goods. Clearly not true, but it's a great way of making the point and sound like you're praising the king.
Caesar is an honourable man.
Exactly.
Yeah. But again, it is published anonymously. There's a reward out for the author of this pamphlet. Everyone knows it's him, no one gives him up. Because he hands it over to the publisher, the risk passes to the publisher. The publisher is sued for sedition and is on trial, and the jury come back with a verdict and they find him not guilty. And the judge says, look, go back in there and think about it again. He's basically saying, go in there and find him guilty. And he does it 9 times. But there's an intervention by the government because they realise they've made this lowly publisher of cheap pamphlets into a martyr for the nationalist cause. So they just let him go. About 2 weeks later, Swift admits in print that it was him. But by that point, he's a national hero.
This is what I need you to explain to me. There are letters to Pope where he talks about Dublin as a dirty dog hole, and yet he's risking his neck to speak up for the Irish people. So what's going on? Does he love Ireland or does he not?
The way people are being treated here is absolutely appalling, and he can't not see that because he is in among the people. He has a vexatious spirit and he cannot stand injustice.
As Catholics, Pope's family were forced to move out of London when he was a young boy.
There you go.
Can you show me where it is? It's down there?
But there is now a memorial to him here in the city.
So in this quiet little court in the city of London on the 21st of May, 1688, ta-da! Alexander Pope was born. And, oh God, there's cobwebs. I'm not having that. So Pope's born in the city and lives here till he's like 11, 12, so he must have really got to know the place.
I would never have come across this by accident.
You know what? I've never seen it before, but you know what? I love it.
In the 18th century, this was the heart of London's burgeoning financial district, and the coffee houses became a place for marketing and trading shares. Both Pope and Swift found themselves caught up in the world's first financial crash.
One thing that keeps cropping up when you read 18th century stuff is the phrase South Sea Bubble. And I'm going to admit, I don't really understand what it's all about.
This is Change Alley. That's short for Exchange Alley. So this was the stock market. People would get their agents to come down here and buy stocks and shares or come down here and sell them. Nobody knew who the agents were working for. So it's quite sneaky, it's quite back alley kind of economics.
One thing I do get about it is there was a lot of very, very influential people, including members of the royal family, who made a lot of money out of it. But what was the South Sea Company?
It was a monopoly on trading with the Spanish colonies. It was a company that was set up here. So trading on reputation, people started buying stocks, and it's a feeding frenzy. People started buying the stocks for way over value. I mean, it went from 100 to 1,000 per share.
On no real basis, in fact?
No real basis in fact. It was just a belief. It was a consensus of opinion that these were really, really valuable. And then all of a sudden people realised this company isn't doing any business, and they started dumping shares and the whole company collapsed. And it took a lot of people's fortunes with it. I mean, everything was different after 1720 when it went bust.
The scandal helped Robert Walpole become the first Whig Prime Minister with false promises of retribution for those responsible.
Robert Walpole is a name that happens a lot in Pope's later satirical poetry. And Walpole basically covers up for all these very influential people, which obviously gives him a lot of power. In fact, to use a phrase from your own world, he knows where the bodies are buried.
But it was a Tory company, that's the thing, is it was a Tory proposition, but Swift was implicated in it because he was a Tory. But then Swift goes on to write an epic poem in 1721. Can I read you some bits of it?
Oh, please do.
He does not miss the Tories and hit the wall, I'll tell you. He's not sparing anybody. He says, "There is a gulf where thousands fell. Here all the bold adventurers came. A narrow sound, though deep as hell. Change Alley is the dreadful name. When stock is high, they came between, making by second hand their offers. Then cunningly retire unseen, each with $1 million in his coffers."
Hey, brilliant.
He got it.
Wisely, Pope and Swift had sold their shares before the crash. Pope's translation of the Iliad, meanwhile, had proved a much more lucrative investment. He felt he was onto a winner, so decided to tackle another Homer epic, the Odyssey.
So, you know, Pope had a bowling green at Twickenham. Obviously, that's gone, along with the villa. But in the spirit of...
Beautiful.
Hi. Hi. Not bad. Not bad.
Take that.
So, translating the Iliad really nearly killed him. And he doesn't want to go through that again. And so he does quite a bad thing. Now, on the original proposal for the translation of the Odyssey, it says, "I will be assisted by 2 of my friends." It's in the small print, so to speak, and it sounds very much like, oh, well, they'll refill the inkwell, pass him a sheet of A4. Yeah. But it's a bit more than that.
This time, he employed 2 assistants, William Broome and Elijah Fenton, who took on 12 of the 24 books.
People really weren't happy about it. They'd bought Pope, and they'd got Pope, open brackets, plus Broome and Fenton, and it's not what they wanted.
Can I read you what Swift said to him
about
it in the letters?
This is a friend writing to him and saying, I know that you've been slated for doing this, but he gives him an excuse, because that's what you do with your pals. He says, I'm exceedingly pleased that you've done with translations. Lord Oxford often lamented that a rascally world should lay you under a necessity of misemploying your genius for so long a time.
He was such an honourable man, such a lover of poetry, and now it does feel like he's churned one out for the cash. His reputation never quite recovered.
As Pope's reputation took a knock, Swift's status as the voice of the Irish people continued apace. In 1724, he began a series of 7 pamphlets, known collectively as the Drapier's Letters, in response to the British government's attempt to introduce inferior copper coins to Ireland.
The issue is really political. They weren't consulted, and it was corrupt.
These letters started to appear.
Yeah.
And they're anonymous.
They're anonymous, this MB Drapier, and they're meant to pour acid on the immediate political situation. Right. Drapier is the proper pronunciation. My thesis on this is that he is kind of vernacularizing it. A Dubliner would say, the Drapier.
So it's his accent, so he's assuming the voice of a Drapier.
Oh, very much so. And of course, this is his métier. This is what he does all the time. The first one is a letter to the shopkeepers, tradesmen, farmers and common people of Ireland. By the fourth one, he's writing to the whole people of Ireland. And what he's saying to them is to reject the coinage.
Let Wood endeavour to persuade the people there that we ought to receive his coin, and let me convince our people here that they ought to reject it under pain of our utter undoing.
There's a little thing he keeps quoting that you have to say, if you're willing to accept this coinage. And he keeps on, we're not willing.
In the patent, there was a line that said, you don't have to accept it. So that's what he's alluding to all the way through.
And I'm sure Swift is behind it. You have the beggars of Dublin coming out to say, please don't give us this coin, because we really don't want to accept it. Now,
so how is this a triumph for him?
well, the patent is withdrawn. Eventually, they take all the coins back and they ship them off to North America, where they become copper coinage. Through the Drapier's letters, he becomes instantly a folk hero, so that you literally have poems on his birthday, bonfires on his birthday. It's a news item when he goes off to England in 1726. Wow. It's a news item when he comes back.
I've always had the idea that when Swift went to Ireland, after he'd lost his Tory status, that he was sort of going into exile. I just wondered how much prestige and money and everything comes with that jump.
The way it works is that the dean, for the time being, is the recipient of tithes and rentals for property owned by the cathedral. Right. He was making about £700 a year.
How much is it? I mean...
Well, my estimate is that the multiplier is at least 400 to get you to today's money.
So he's making about 300 grand a year?
At least. Wow. He's in the top 1-2%.
Wow.
Swift was now a national treasure in Ireland, but back in England, Pope needed something to help restore his spirits. Fortunately, his greatest friend was about to return.
I suppose you're wondering why I brought you all here.
Next time.
I wish you and I might pass this part of life together.
Oh, no. Pope and Swift sow the seeds for some of their greatest works yet.
Renewed by Orger's sympathetic force. This is Curll now. He's covered in the stuff.